Let's talk about the true ending of Slay the Spire, the final boss. An ending so challenging that you don't even have to do it with any ascensions turned on to get the achievements. I'm talking, of course, about the Heart of the Spire. So in this video, we'll discuss first what you have to do in order to actually unlock the final ending, then we'll take a brief look at Act 4, and finally look closely at the heart itself, and discuss some key strategies you can use across all characters in order to win. Act 4 is locked when you first start playing through the Spire. First, you have to complete Act 3 with the Ironclad, Silent, and Defect. After that, you unlock the ability to pick up 3 keys throughout the run. You have to collect all 3 of these keys in a run that you wish to unlock Act 4 and have a chance to fight the heart. The red key is unlocked by choosing Recall at any campfire as your rest action, meaning that for that campfire you cannot rest or upgrade. The blue key is picked up in any chest you find throughout the Spire, but you must leave behind the relic that you would otherwise pick up. And the green key is found by defeating the challenging Burning Elite. The Burning Elite shows up one time each act until it is defeated. It either gets a plus 25% health boost, a strength buff depending on your current act, regenerate throughout the fight based on your act, or it gets metallicized to block every turn. Defeat the Burning Elite to pick up the green key along with your typical bonus rewards. You have to collect each key before entering the Act 3 boss fight. Once you win and see the score screen, you will find a hidden door, which is unlocked by the keys you've picked up. Walk through this door and you will be greeted by the 4 rooms that make up Act 4. First, you have a campfire, where you can perform any of your typical campfire actions. Next, you have one final shot to spend any gold to prepare for the hardest gauntlet in the game. But before we look at the heart, a challenging elite fight stands in our way. The Spire Shield and Spear are quite the challenging pair to fight. They buff each other, they take turns hitting you for huge amounts of damage or applying massive amounts of block, they debuff you, and, of course, you start the fight surrounded, meaning that one enemy is standing behind you and is going to deal an additional 50% damage. Now, you can turn around in the fight by attacking or playing anything that targets one of these enemies. You can also throw a potion at one of the enemies to turn around. Keep that in mind as you plan out what cards you're going to play in what order. It's very easy to just flat out die in turn 2 of this fight. On turn 1, the shield is either going to debuff you by taking a point of strength or focus, or it's going to give itself and the spear 30 block while the spear hits you for some damage and adds burns into your draw pile. Note that if you're playing on Ascension 17 or higher, those burns get added to the top of your draw pile instead, meaning that if you don't have any extra draw in your deck, you get a total of 3 cards to play on turn 2, where the spear is going to hit you for 10x3 or 10x4 damage. Turn 3 will either find you facing a ton of block, losing more strength, or seeing the enemies buffed to deal even more damage to you before the cycle repeats. Did I mention that both the shield and the spear start the fight with artifact, meaning that your first attempts of vulnerability, weak, or poison are actually just going to get negated? This fight will absolutely wreck any deck that takes more than 2 turns to get online. And don't forget, you don't get a campfire heal before taking on the heart. The best things to do to plan ahead for this fight are to find ways to draw more cards and to strip the artifact down. Make sure you always end your turn facing the enemy that's going to do the most damage so you don't take that bonus damage on top of it. Another thing you want to do is focus down the shield or the spear. Don't share the damage between the two. Get one of them taken down and then fight the other one. So if you manage to make it through this challenging elite fight, now you get to fight the Corrupted Heart. And hopefully you've kept yourself some health and some potions. But before you start spamming cards against this heart, take time to say caw caw down in the comments and really study the heart here. Let's start by looking at its buffs. We have Beat of Death, which deals 1 damage to you every time you play a card throughout the entire fight. If you're playing on high ascensions, you're going to take 2 Beat of Death at the start. The heart also has an invincible buff, meaning that the amount of damage it can take each turn is capped at 300 or 200 for higher ascensions. Now take a quick breath and pull yourself together here. The hard part of this fight is yet to come. Alright, turn 1, we're not getting attacked. This gives you just a tiny bit of a chance to get any setup rolling before the madness begins. Don't forget to play some kind of block to mitigate the beat of death. On turn 1, the heart plays Debilitate, which shuffles a Dazed, Slimed, Burn, and Wound into your draw pile. But wait, there's more. You're also given 2 turns of Vulnerable, Weak, and Frail debuffs. Here's your first tip for surviving the heart fight. If you can bring any kind of artifact, either through an Ancient Potion, Panacea, or Fossilized Helix, you can block the Vulnerable from being applied so you're only weak and frail through this first cycle of the heart. Let's move on to turn 2. You're either going to take the big hit for 40 base damage, which scales to 60 if you're still vulnerable, or you're going to take the multi-attack, which hits for 2x12 or 2x15 damage if you're on high ascensions. There's a 50-50 chance you're going to see either of these, and there's no way to know on turn 1 which one it is. So what do we do to plan here? Find some kind of strength reduction or weak in your deck to make the multi-hit attack easier to manage. Anything that makes you intangible can really help stop the huge attack, and any cards or relics that return damage deal huge numbers back to the heart. Look for Thorns Potions, Bronze Scales, Static Discharge, and Flame Barrier to help here. Are you still alive? Great, let's look at turn 3, where you're going to get the other version of what you didn't have on turn 2. So if you had the multi-hit, now you get the huge damage. Did you survive the big hit? Well, now you're taking a multi-attack. Don't forget, you're still taking Beat of Death damage on every card you play, and if you didn't have any artifact on turn 1, you are still vulnerable, weak, and frail, meaning you're taking more damage, blocking less, and hitting for less. Another tip for turns 2 and 3, grab orange pellets if they show up in a shop. It is one of the most powerful shop relics in the game, because if you play any attack, power, and skill on the same turn, it wipes all of your debuffs away, making it much easier to deal with this first cycle of the heart. And congratulations, you have actually survived the first cycle of the heart's attacks. I hope you've been dealing a lot of damage, because things ramp up again here. On turn 4, you get a mild reprieve as the heart buffs itself, giving it 2 artifact charges. Are you ready? Because now you're moving on into the next round of the fight. While your debuffs have worn off by now, the heart still has Beat of Death and Invincible to stop you. You've likely drawn into a lot of those status cards the heart gave you, which brings me to another tip. Find a medical kit. It allows you to remove the wound and the burn so you can draw into better cards later on. On that note, we want any kind of deck manipulation, extra draw, and retain we can so that we can keep the cards we need for the turns we need them. The heart continues its cycle. You get 2 turns of attacks that swap between the big hit and the multi-hit, and then a buff turn, with each cycle giving the heart an additional buff. On cycle 2, the heart gains an additional point of Beat of Death damage. On cycle 3, it gets Painful Stabs, which means every time you get hit, it adds a wound to your deck. Meaning that if you get hit several times on the multi-attack, you can gain up to 15 wound cards in a single turn. Cycle 4, the heart is going to buff itself 10 extra strength, and cycle 5 and every cycle thereafter, the heart buffs 50 strength. If you drag the fight out long enough, the heart will deal more damage than the game allows you to block, as the cap sits at 999 block per turn. Once the heart is hitting for 100 damage 12 or 15 times, you're toast. So remember, your fight is on a timer. Other tips: if you can combo Tori and Tungsten Rod, or either one of them, you can take 0 damage on your multi-attacks until it does more than 5. Tori reduces that 5 or less down to 1, and Tungsten Rod removes that last damage. If you're playing Silent, After Image can really help to counteract some of the Beat of Death. Also as Silent, even if you apply 800 poison on turn 1 somehow, you are still capped by the invincible buff every turn, meaning you can only deal 200 or 300 damage of poison each turn. Passive block is also really helpful for every turn of the heart fight, whether you're picking up the boat relics, frost orbs, or calipers. Finally, make sure you don't use any debuff cards on a turn that the heart is going to buff itself, otherwise they get removed. At the end of the day, defeating the heart starts on floor 1 of the Spire. Infinite decks and claw decks are rarely going to be able to keep up against Beat Death, not to mention, if you don't have any extra draw, then you're going to draw the wound and the slime and the burn every turn, and you can't play your infinite anyways. You always have to be looking for some way to continue blocking and keep drawing more cards. Keep trying and eventually you'll figure it out. Now it's time for some end of video news. We're going to start streaming early this year in 2025. I will post edited stream highlights here to this channel, and I'm thinking about starting an unedited channel where I'll post the full streamed runs if you can't catch us over on Twitch. When you write caw down in the comments section, let me know what platforms you like to watch your streams on, and what kind of things would make you interested to tuning in to more Spire. I hope to see you all live soon.